Okay, good evening, everybody. We're going to call the meeting to order of the Santa Monica Planning Commission of May 6, 2026 at 6:02 p.m. Will you rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ross, can you please call the roll?
Yes, sorry. Commissioner Fresco?
Yes, I'm here.
Commissioner Lambert, absent. Commissioner Landris?
Here.
Commissioner Reese, absent. Commissioner Wasserman is walking in currently. So I'm going to say present for him. Vice Chair Chaco?
Present.
And Chair Hamilton.
Here. Thank you. We can now move on to the Planning Director's report.
Sure. So your next meeting on May 20th is actually going to be canceled. And then your meeting with items after that, I think we were looking at June 17th. I'm not sure if there's anything on June 3rd. We're holding that June 3rd meeting for now, and we'll obviously let you know if things shift around. On that June 17th meeting, I think, we're looking at bringing back the approach 2 with respect to SB 79, and then the realignment plan resolution of recommendation. That's the subject of discussion tonight. For the Architectural Review Board, it's a recent meeting at April 20th. They approved a structure of merit design review for 123 Ocean Park Boulevard, and then a couple of mixed-use housing projects, 1514 7th Street, a 23-story, 124-unit condo project was continued. And then the 1655 26th Street, a 401-unit, 8-story housing project was approved. At their upcoming May 18th meeting, they'll be hearing a single-unit dwelling and accessory dwelling unit at 122 Hart Avenue, which is in the South Beach neighborhood, and a couple of housing projects at 3205 Ocean Park Boulevard and 1399 Olympic Boulevard. Landmarks Commission, their upcoming meeting next Monday will be a discussion on a structure of merit, 1125 18th Street, another one at 1626 California, also a structure of merit, and then also an update from the recent Preservation Justice Workshop. And then finally, to report out from City Council, at the last City Council meeting, we provided an update to the City Council and an overview of SB 79. We were joined by Commissioner Landris, who was reporting on behalf of the Commission's discussion with respect to this. Council did authorize or direct staff. They adopted a resolution of intention to initiate the process to implement Approach 2, while we kind of punt on Approach 3 to the housing element, except that there will be advancing a small portion of the TOD alternative plan for the parcels within the Expo Bundy TOD zone. that, and of course, we still have a technical assistance letter. They also requested a return, a progress update within 6 months. A number of other directives, also provided consistent with the commission's discussion. And then at the May 12th meeting, which is this upcoming Tuesday, there will be, I think we're scheduled to bring an emergency IZO on special standards for EV fleet charging, and also a couple of items for mobility of Santa Monica Boulevard safety study and the adoption of the local roadway safety plan, which is not the update, but the 2022 version, really just to ensure we remain competitive for grants.
Yes.
Are there any questions?
Just a quick thing to thank staff. I thought that worked very well on the 28th with representing the commission. I think the combo 11 and 13 worked nicely. Hopefully we'll get the 13 item on the other matter. Yeah, I found it worked I thought the setup was really good, and they heard us, and I think we were tag teaming well. I just wanted to add, if I might, the one place where the council had a substantive addition to our work was that apparently the Rent Control Board had done some work on SB 79 last August and had actually done a census of the 2-unit rent-controlled property, or the rent-controlled units in buildings of 2 units or less that were going to be more vulnerable under SB 79, and wanted to make sure that the city was doing everything it could to protect those tenants, including simply informing them of their rights and making sure that they were resourced relative to potential displacement. So that was, I thought, an important and helpful addition to everything that we had put in, but by and large, we were all on the same page, and so was council, which was great. I also wanted to ask, there's a lot in the news on the opinion pages about AB 1740. I think it could be really helpful to have maybe a fact sheet about what the rules are, what goes to coastal, how, what our local coastal plan, which is still in preparation and arguably needs to be budgeted for, would do or not do. Because everybody, the assumption out there is that if AB 1740 passes, then it's going to be the Wild West, and I'm pretty sure that's not true. So it'd be really helpful to have either some more information or a fact sheet to kind of cut through the excitement. Thank you, Commissioner Fresco, for that diplomatic word.
Thank you. I have a question. One of the projects that came up was 1514 7th Street, and that was noted as a condo project. We'd had a conversation, I think, last month that there's been very, very few for sale multifamily projects. Is this a new deal, or has this been in the queue for a while?
Yeah.
This is it was maybe submitted about 5 months ago. It's nearing its end of its 150-day review cycle, as is allowed by AB 130. So it is very exciting that not only this is an ownership project, but an ownership project of this size.
Right.
I can't remember the time we've had one of these, or if ever. So
Yeah,
very
I
exciting
think
to
it's
see how this kind of continues.
Yeah, I think that's positive. Are there any other questions? Yes, sir. Commissioner Wasserman.
I saw on the Urbanize LA blog that there was an application at 1949 17th Street under Senate Bill 684, which is basically 1123, but for multifamily zones, and it might be a little more advantageous to use that in maybe R2. We had that whole discussion. We said that there was only one 1123 project. How many 684 projects do we have?
So we've had the first, you're right, the 684 and 1123 are essentially kind of the same law. We had one 684 on Stewart. I'm blanking on the actual address. That was actually the first project we had under these government codes. Then we had an 1123 submitted. So this would be our second one in the multifamily, but our third kind of utilizing this new state law.
Great. And then, not about the specifics, but just to surface a conversation we had. We vote on tentative map, or vesting tentative maps, extensions of tentative maps. As Sean has pointed out in the past, it kind of is misleading because all we can do is approve the air rights divisions. We can't say anything else about the project. Is there anything that says we have to vote on that in state law? Can that be made ministerial?
We are looking at trying to update our subdivision section of our zoning ordinance to opt into allowing parcel maps to be approved at a ministerial level, not just ones that are through SB 9 or SB 1123. My understanding is we would have to do a code amendment in order to do that, but it is on staff's mind to try to streamline some of these projects that are getting kind of caught in the current process.
Are there any further questions? Okay. Any planning commissioner announcements? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll make two. Let me just make sure I'm getting the date right. May 18th, is it? Yes, May 18th at the California Endowment. The sister research center to where I work, the UCLA Lewis Center for Regional Policy Studies, is having their annual Interactions LA event on housing and transportation solutions. They have a whole panel on missing middle housing. I will actually be back in Westwood covering for people, but you all should go. It's a great event. And then this Saturday at the fire station is Fire Service Day. Get to see some fire trucks and see the firefighters at work. It's a great time.
Commissioner Fresco.
On May 17th, I invite everybody to come to a free block party to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Santa Monica Conservancy's occupancy of the Shotgun House, where you can learn all about how an old building can be adaptively reused to become a functional public serving place, and there will be cake. So I recommend everybody come. And
But
we-
no shotguns, right?
No shotguns,
Okay, good.
but we will be recognizing local attorney Ken Kutcher for a service award because he has been extremely generous with pro bono services to help us, most particularly with our lease for the Shotgun House, which was not an easy process.
What time of the day is that
2
event?
to 4 p.m.
2 to 4.
Live music, cake. Just saying. Chocolate with vanilla frosting.
When like someone who knows very, very well how the cake will come to be.
I will
Homemade.
be out of town on June 17th, but I'm available June 3rd.
Yes, I'm likely remote on June 17th, but would be available June 3rd.
Okay.
That way I might get an in-person meeting and there might be, and right, exactly.
Yeah, we appreciate obviously the June 17th meeting is anticipated to be some big items. So we'll look to see how best to kind of agendize and pick a date if we are finding out some of the commissioners are not able to attend, or at least in person.
Okay. All right. Looks like there's no further announcements. So I want to talk about requests to speak on an agenda item. They must be submitted on a speaker's request form, which we call a CHIT, and submitted to the commission secretary. All requests to address the commission on public hearing items must be submitted prior to the commission's consideration of the item. Do we have any chits for items not on the agenda? Okay. Then we can move on to the consent calendar. Are there any commissioners that would like to pull any items off of the consent calendar? Okay, I don't see any hands going up. If not, we shall proceed with the consent calendar approval. We do have a chit on item 7B from Mr. Swid. Ms. Swid, my apologies. Yes, please. Yes.
Good evening, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. She kind of explained to me what this was all about. So that's already basically a done deal. You're just here to give them an extension. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Because originally I had opposed it. I represent the building, the high-rise building next door. And so I didn't know that the city had actually approved that. So she explained that to me. That's great. It's nice seeing you all here doing your work.
Yeah. Thank you for coming
I wish more
tonight.
people would take interest in what goes on with the city of Santa Monica, especially from the point of planning. She also directed me to your website where I could find out how to talk to the governor and find out how he comes to assume that they know how many people should live in Santa Monica and, push all this apartment building left and right. To my observation, what I've seen, most of them are pretty empty. So, but thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
Great, we can do a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Okay. We're going to now move into item number 8A, study session regarding the realignment plan implementation and adoption of resolutions of intention. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, I'll be giving it. So tonight is just a study session. It's really, I think, just some initial draft concepts that we want to walk through with you in terms of how to implement council's authorization to begin implementation of this portion of the realignment plan. We'll be discussing, and I stress the sort of like potential concepts because none of this is fully baked yet. We're sort of, to put a kind of spitballing a little bit, just to get some reaction to some ideas. And what we're looking for is just, direction, on what we return to you with in terms of a future recommendation. You can see here just the anticipated timeline. This is a high priority item for the council as it came out of the October realignment plan. So the study session tonight, we anticipate, returning back to you with a formal recommendation at your June 3rd or 17th meeting or some meeting in June. We'll take a look at availability and then anticipate bringing it to council on July the 14th. Just to, I think, review the realignment plan objectives from the October 28th meeting, there were two items in there with respect to developing affordable, livable, and secure housing for all. There was the direction in there to ensure that future development along boulevards is compatible with existing neighborhoods without jeopardizing the housing element and in focusing housing in downtown. So that was around housing. And then secondly, around the strategic use of cities' land assets and removing those land value constraints. So, kind of three things there around assessing development standards, uses, and processes for city-owned parcels in the downtown and the parcels within the Gateway Master Plan area that's identified in the Downtown Community Plan. Considering regulatory adjustments, to support strategic use of city-owned parcels, and also, the Gateway being an important area, sort of entrance to the downtown, how can we remove constraints, to make better use of those properties there. And then, finding ways to maximize community benefit, particularly from city-owned sites, in order to support economic opportunity and growth in developing housing opportunities. So the city does own, quite a bit of land or some land in downtown, and really thinking, strategically how to maximize that, for our community. Oops, it's gone backwards here. So tonight, I think we're kind of breaking it down into three big concepts. One is around the idea of a boulevard low-scale housing incentive program. Secondly is a downtown housing bonus incentive program, and then third is around driving downtown economic opportunity. So we'll kind of go through these three big concepts kind of one by one. So the first one around Boulevard low scale housing incentives is really, coalescing around, we've had a lot of discussion, I guess, recently kind of around this notion of like ownership housing. And then in line, with the direction from the realignment plan to think about, what can we do to address sort of compatibility of housing development, where it's next to existing residential neighborhoods. As you know, all of our commercial boulevards kind of run, generally east-west through the city. They're right adjacent to the residential neighborhoods. And however, we cannot be in a situation where we would be jeopardizing our housing element. So to be clear, this does not involve any change in our baseline standards. All of those would remain. It's just, can we think about a different kind of program, that has enough incentives in there that incentivize low-scale, mid-rise housing, that provides a transition to residential neighborhoods. We definitely are seeing full use of state density bonus, and the city's, own baseline zoning standards, right, that were implemented as part of the housing element. So that's one piece of this. And then the ownership housing. So how do we provide incentives to promote larger family-sized ownership units where we really aren't seeing that at this moment? Gosh, what is wrong with this thing? So here we go. Is it not moving? Okay. Here we go. So this is just a quick peek at some of the housing projects, that have been recently approved, and we generally see, that scale around 7 to 8 stories. The table's a little hard to read, but you can see there in FAR and height, anywhere, what the current standards are, and, what we're getting, so you can see our baseline standards anywhere between, to the extent we see most of our development, on those, probably everywhere except for the NC, or anywhere is the baseline of like 45, 55, 70 feet. And then, just about every single housing project is using state density bonus law to then achieve greater heights and FARs to accommodate those bonus units. Another one here. What we're having, okay. Yeah, this is an example of additional housing projects that have recently been approved. You can see they're generally in that 7 to 8 story range. So also taking a look at just some facts, this is just data we pulled from, the 6-cycle housing element when we looked at housing supply across the city. Only 21% of the city's housing supply is 3 bedrooms or larger. What you see there in 4 and 5 bedrooms, most of that is, likely single family homes. If you're looking at sort of the, condo product and stuff like that, largely, is where you see that 15% 3-bedroom, 2 bedrooms have, 36% share. So it's not a large percentage of the housing stock in the city. The most of what we see is a lot of studios and 1-bedrooms. So this is just walking through, what some of those incentives are. And again, these are just thoughts, and we welcome the feedback and the discussion around this. So as an idea, could we create a low-scale housing incentive program around rental and ownership, lower scale? In this case, we're thinking, is it 55 feet, something less, something more? I think we're open to discussion around that. And because it's a local incentive program and we very much see unit mix, waived and pretty consistently across every project, yet it is something that we've heard really from, the Planning Commission, the council, our community, how do we bring back, a better unit mix, like larger family size units, just larger units generally, more bedrooms in those units. So because it's an incentive program, we could require that if you wanted to participate in this, there is a unit mix of 2 and 3 bedrooms. For rental, thinking about, 3 waivers from standards. So the idea here would be to say that even though you can see the AHPP proposal here, it might be fee only, or in the ownership realm, maybe there's no AHPP requirement, we could still replicate, them getting like some measure of what they would get under state density bonus. So not the bonus, but maybe, modifications from standards, right? You can see 3 waivers versus 4, and then payment of impact fees for rental at 50%, or in the case of ownership, no impact fees. Why more incentives for ownership? It's not just because it's something that, we've definitely heard a lot of interest about, but also because for ownership housing, why it's not getting built largely is that sort of construction, defect liability, is substantial. It's a big risk, for builders to take on. And, is there something the city can do for things that are within our control to sort of mitigate some of that risk? For when someone's ready to do it, does it maybe tip the scale? So, the levers we have are largely around fees and inclusionary housing. Like, there's not much else the city, has with respect to the development permitting process. So that's some of the ideas around, why more incentives around ownership versus rental. And we would think this program would apply to the mixed-use boulevard district. So you can see the MUBL, the MUB, GC, and NC zones. So this is just a summary, the kind of why for this program, the intent to have a diversity of housing types, promoting that compatibility transition to the adjacent uses, and then facilitating more ownership opportunities with family size units. So now moving on to the downtown housing incentive program, you can think of this sort of as a complement, to the Boulevard low scale incentive program. So this, what we'd be looking for here is to offset the incentives for that reduced scale, and we'll talk through kind of our thinking around that by transferring height to the downtown. This is essentially like a local downtown density bonus program, and then flexibility with the city's AHPP. So here you can see, what would be available to downtown projects as an idea, what the current minimum requirements are in the AHPP, depending on, how many units are in the project. Generally, we see a lot of that 20 units or more where you can do, on-site or off-site. So in this new concept, what would become available is that the projects themselves would still have the ability to choose one of 3 options. They're not mandated, so that would be the difference. Like, you don't have to have the units on site. You have the option to pay a fee to have the units on site or to put the units off site. Where it makes sense, and then here in terms of the height transfer we were talking about, it's approximately, if you think about, you saw that prior chart of the 45 to 70 feet, if we lowered the incentive, if the incentive program, was capped at 55 feet or whatever it is, we would transfer that difference in height. Approximately that 10 to 20 feet would then move over to downtown. So downtown would have an increase in the baseline height, is the idea. We didn't come up with sort of an increase in FAR, I guess. Part of it being that the FARs are actually decently high in the downtown. That, from what we've seen, hasn't really been a barrier, to achieving some of the units. So that was the thinking behind that, but certainly open to feedback on that. And then in terms of the density bonus, again, because state law requires the on-site units in order for a project to be eligible to use density bonus, the idea here would be, as long as a downtown housing project complies with the AHPP in all of the 3 potential ways, so even if they paid a fee or, had off-site affordable units, it would still receive a density bonus, unlimited waivers, 3 incentives, concessions. So like, this was an attempt to mirror state law, essentially, in order to support more housing in the downtown. And then now moving on to the third draft concept is around downtown city-owned sites. So the idea here would be, in order to maximize the potential for city-owned sites for community benefit, would be to actually exempt them from the zoning ordinance. And just to give you a frame of reference, the sites include the downtown station, so the downtown expo, or the kiss and ride lot, but by then, and then there's an EV charging lot that just right above it off of 5th Street. Parking structure 1, the old fire station number 1 and 4th, 5th in Arizona. are some key sites, that this would apply to. And it would provide, again, the flexibility to maximize the community benefits on these sites. Within the gateway area, the concept here would be, you can see there in the blue outline, this is taken from the downtown community plan. So originally the plan posited that the city would prepare this gateway master plan at some point, but until that happened, some baseline standards would be in effect. Obviously that didn't happen, right? However, that concept of the gateway area being kind of this special place, being the entrance to the downtown, it's right beside the freeway, kind of an acceptance that, something interesting, should be happening here. And, the DCP kind of punted on kind of what that is. So instead of coming up with a plan, is really just implementing, now in the zoning ordinance, the idea around, you can see the standards here of 4.0, 84-foot FAR, and you can see that non-housing projects, require a development review permit or development agreement, depending on the site, on the size. And it really covers 3 parcels, which is currently the parcel where a hotel is located, the former Sears property, and then the city's own downtown station site. Yep.
I'm sorry, quick question. The city owns the Kiss and Ride lot at the top.
Yeah.
We don't own the other 2, right?
We don't own the other 2. No. They're privately owned, yeah. So the concept here would be to establish a 130-foot height limit for all project types. So, all, whether housing or non-housing. So that would increase the baseline height for whether it's housing or non-housing projects for the gateway area only. And we were noting here that the existing Tier 3 FAR for non-housing projects is already at 3.5. So these are fairly sizable parcels too, so the FAR increase didn't seem necessary in this case, but height could certainly be an issue in terms of fitting that. Thinking about allowing for flexibility in land use to the extent that is a barrier, and then maybe even thinking about a flexibility in the approval process for non-housing projects. One of the things that the Sears property has been, save for the temporary relocation of Pali High, for a moment, it's really been vacant for a while. They've really had issues, finding a future use of it, and part of it is really just, the uncertainty in the process. It's also located in the coastal zone, so there's a lot of things for such a key parcel at a key entrance to the downtown. Is there a way to create conditions, such that, something really interesting and innovative, could happen there? So, to wrap up, I think the deck here is really kind of leaving you with, some guided policy discussions and questions. So, really looking for your input on these initial concepts for implementing this portion of the realignment plan. So on the Boulevard Low Scale Incentive, I think particularly interested in thinking, the geographic applicability of the incentive program. It's to the boulevards. Should it be somewhere else? Should there be less zones that it applies to? I think questions around what does it mean to be low scale? Is 55 feet the right height? Is the required unit mix of 2 and 3 bedrooms are we hitting on the right notes there? And I think, although we did put in there, either payment of the in lieu fee or in the ownership model, no AHPP necessary, but I think Commissioner Landris at the last meeting, you introduced this idea of, is there a deed restriction beyond moderate income? I mean, I think we've started just to have all these discussions are kind of merging together a little bit. And is there interest in kind of looking at that, or should this sort of ride on its own, in the interest of seeing just what works and not putting a whole bunch of ornaments on the Christmas tree to start? I think it's a foundational question, to think through in terms of what are the goals we're trying to achieve. Secondly, on the downtown housing incentive program, is there support for that flexibility and AHPP compliance? Is the height offset, for the Boulevard low scale incentive, is that the right approach to kind of, affirmatively increase, height in the downtown? And is there support for this local density bonus program, for when they provide the offsite or the in lieu fee? And then finally, on the downtown gateway, I think feedback on the idea of, eligibility for a ministerial process. This is for non-housing projects. That would be different because we offer that sort of streamlined process only for housing projects right now. But, does the interest in sort of activating, that gateway area kind of override the process concerns we have in other parts of the city, and why we have, the discretionary requirement for non-housing projects, considerations around land use flexibility, and, is there potentially, we didn't propose increasing the FAR in the gateway, but, could there be, like, should it just be non-housing and housing match up? So you would increase the 3.5, FAR to 4 for non-housing, which is what housing projects get right now. So I think that brings us to the conclusion of this. Yeah, so there's an ROI before you tonight as well. Happy to answer your questions. I'll leave this up.
I have a question. Was the ROI that was distributed to the Planning Commission at the end of last week, was that changed or modified in any way in what we're looking at tonight?
We did update the ROI. We had inadvertently included a concept in there we didn't mean to, so that's why we updated it. Yeah, I think it was it Monday? I can't remember. Yeah.
It was updated on Monday to remove references to 6.22.
Yep.
Got it. Okay. So I think as we talk about this, would like to propose some kind of rules of the road of how we do this. So I think we should have a time of just asking general questions, and then pretty quickly, I think I'd like to get into answering each of the questions, Jing, that you've posed to us, and we can just kind of go down the line and provide our responses to those questions and see if there's some consensus that comes from that. So for now, let's ask some high-level general questions, and then we can get into the bullet points afterwards. Okay, so Commissioner Fresco, do you have some general questions, comments?
I have a lot of them, I'm sorry. But, yeah, no, this is huge. I just have to say that, I mean, to be honest, with all due respect to the work I know went into this, that it felt to me like the death knell of progressive Santa Monica because of the affordable housing production program exemptions being so broad. And it is very troubling to me. So just that's kind of where I'm coming from. I don't see, I guess my question is, at the very core, if we're talking high level here, how does encouraging a lot more market rate for sale housing without any AHPP requirement serve our community goals of protecting our most vulnerable people and making sure that we maintain what little economic diversity we have in the city?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's one that we wrestled with, and it's why we actually put this question up here with respect, to, I think we were trying to give the commission something to react to. I think we were coming at, and it's fine. I think we've really struggled a lot with this question of, why don't we get more ownership proposals, and I think we have roundly heard, like, it's just too risky. Like, nobody wants to deal with the liability, that comes with that. It seems to be a product that is just harder to finance. The feasibility metrics are harder. So we were coming at from the perspective like, well, if there is an interest in seeing larger, 2 and 3 bedroom ownership units, which is exceedingly rare in a city other than the 3-unit townhome model, right? So this is really trying to encourage kind of not that townhome model, but kind of the, multifamily size building, sort of the mixed use housing project size that we see, right? Sort of these flats, right? But condos. And so, but at a size of like 2 and 3 bedrooms. So it was like just trying to think like, what are the things that we could throw out there that would make it attractive for developers to be interested in doing it? I understand your question for sure around, market rate housing, but we were coming at it really from that lens because it was like, well, if we put on, a deed restriction requirement, number one, like deed restricted ownership, we know is actually quite difficult to implement. Trying to find qualified, buyers, right, at a low income or like, it's just, it doesn't really exist like conventionally. There's just so many barriers to it, has been our experience in the past of trying to implement that program. And we've, heard it from our partners in Housing and Human Services as well, that it is just challenging. And so, that's why we put this question in here, if there is an interest in beyond moderate income, but some unknown cap, like what is that right thing, where, because I think I generally hear things around like we don't have enough families, and then, people kind of like grow out of their unit, but it's like there's something that's missing in this mid-range, and what is that sweet spot? So I think it's very much like an open policy question. I think we started at an end of like, if there's no AHPP, does that move a needle to even get a project built first and foremost, right?
Yeah. Well,
Before we start
getting-
adding
yeah.
on kind of the deed restriction aspect to it, not that there's not an openness, but I think we came at it from that perspective.
I think that, from my perspective, there seems to be a lot of really complicated reasons why these projects aren't breaking ground, and we have to stick to our values as a community, and these levers are unlikely to make more of a difference than other levers we might pull, and these are the ones that we shouldn't pull. That's kind of, I can't help but feel that way. But, the other thing is, just as a student of history and Santa Monica history in particular, and I've gone very deep into our eminent domain past, and so much of these laws, not just the ones that we've amended, but the ones that have come down from the state, are the new eminent domain, and we are moving people out of our city at a pretty quick rate, and people just can't stay here. And it's not going to look good from the rearview mirror. It's all going to become clear. And so I'm just the little squeaking voice, just trying to keep the memory of our past good deeds alive.
I think that's a fair point. And to build on that, we have Measure GS, which is also supposed to fund into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund at a scale that would far outpace whatever fees we'd get from, these AHPP type of incentives. Have we seen any inflow of Measure GS money, meaningful inflow at this point into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund?
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me, so we'd have to get back to you on that. But I remember it being, it's not a small amount. Yeah, I just don't have the exact number. Yeah.
I think that Commissioner Fresco brings up a really, valid point, and it would be good to be able to weigh the trade-offs of waiving the AHPP for sale and look at the community benefit of having moderately priced for sale ownership opportunities in Santa Monica, but be able to look at the loss of that fee in the context of what we're getting on the other side from Measure GS. And if we are seeing some good inflows of funding from Measure GS, then that would help us weigh the cost and benefit of waiving fees for these projects. Is that fair?
Maybe.
Are we staying on the question? Because we have a whole list of ideas.
Well, I think
Yeah, I
a
don't.
part of understanding the fee structure is understanding what the city's working with.
Right, well, it's also important to weigh, weigh things that are permanent and long-lasting versus things that could change over time. And, I don't know if GS is forever, because it has been so controversial, and it could be the next big barrier that people go for to try to get more shovels in the ground. And, it just seems, there has to be a much more stable program than that to balance this, that is not also dependent on the same things that this is dependent on. Does that make sense? Trying to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, there are others, another question that's more structural. When you're talking about transferring the development rights, you use that word, and of course, because of my background, I immediately think, oh, TDRs. But that's not what you're talking about.
No, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I kind
No,
of.
it's just height.
It's
It's
just-
just height, yeah.
So just allowing more height in downtown. So it's not like
Yeah.
people are swapping rights, like I
No.
only have to get to build 5 feet, but I can sell my 3 feet to.
Yeah, no, that's not what we're suggesting. No, this would just be a straight, like, and again, we are not lowering the heights on the boulevards, like literally, it's just an incentive program, but it's the trade-off of like, if you're gonna offer this incentive here, then what's the equivalent incentive in downtown? So it's almost like just a trading, of that.
Right.
I think we just, it's just very approximately like 10 to 20 feet, roughly, that would then like transfer, quote unquote.
And so the only real incentive, or I shouldn't put it that way, but the incentive to opt for this 5-foot limit is that you get the affordable housing waived or eased, and that you get the other fees waived. We
Yeah.
get rid of a lot of, so,
impact fees, yeah.
and that's like another thing, like Josh was saying, that we need to weigh what's the community benefit and what's the community harm in losing all those fees. We're talking about building a 192-acre park, and we're going to lose our park nexus fees. So I'm just, obviously I have a lot of concerns. I'll let somebody else go, and then I'll harangue you again later on.
So I kind of have a lot. And I'm happy, I would like to ask my questions and then kind of let other people jump in on questions as I go in order to see if we can get somewhere fast, because I have a long list. I want to start by asking what the parcels are. I'm going to go through each one. I'm going to start with the Boulevard Low Scale program. So, our housing element says we have no vacant commercial sites. Rite Aid just goes to Trader Joe's. Boulevard buildings are producing rental income. So where do you think this is, where do we think this is going to happen? And if you don't have a sense of it, then can I convert that question to sort of hold it for later and add it as direction of before we do anything, let's figure out where it's going to happen?
No, that's because it's, even if we were, let's say if we used the housing element SSI, would probably be the most reasonable place if you wanted to see, what is most susceptible to turnover. The applicability of this is, as you see here, the proposal is the mixed-use boulevard district. So this is, all of our commercial boulevards, right? And you're right, there are some sites in there that may become commercial uses that may already be spoken for. Do we literally have vacant land in the city? There are development sites that are out there. I think the way we have seen housing projects kind of show up throughout the city is it's somewhat opportunistic. I couldn't tell you exactly here or there. This is just really thinking about it would apply to all these places. And, these would be the rules for the program should somebody decide to exercise it, if that makes any sense.
So, okay, so then let's just talk about the zoning for a minute. Where on the boulevards where zoning is 70 feet, right? And you're opting into a program that is at 55 feet. How is that an incentive, right? Are you getting enough back for that? And then, on the transit served boulevards, the state floor after July 1st is going to exceed 55 feet. So are we immediately saying, okay, this is really a non-SB 79 project, or are we trying to get people to opt for this over SB 79?
We're trying to provide an incentive to do something lower scale.
Okay. To literally say, I'm going to turn down my opportunity to do SB 79
Yes.
development, and I'm going to opt into this.
Or
Okay.
state density bonus law, or the city's baseline standards. So this is truly a program, again, in line with the direction from the realignment plan, where, what can we do to address, because that's the crux of this, is like, how do we address compatibility and transition to residential neighborhoods where we, it has been a topic of conversation.
Yeah.
As we're seeing, 7, 8, 10, 12 story, buildings on the boulevards, so that's the genesis of this,
Okay.
is could you be enticed to do something that is lower,
Right.
Have
we, because if we have these 2 and 3 bedroom requirements, and I want to spend a couple of minutes on that, we have these lots that are capped at 15,000 square feet. Do we know whether these larger units pencil at our land costs?
No, I mean, we didn't run that. This was just
Okay.
an idea.
So then 2 things. One, I just need to I'm gonna channel Commissioner Lambert for a minute and just say we can't use the word family sized. That's a fair housing trigger. So we just need to clean up that language, but let's assume we're talking about 2 and 3 bedroom units. How do we prevent conversion to, subdivision of those units? Obviously, we can't limit unrelated occupants, but the goal is to serve groups, right? Like the goal is to meet a need. Do we have a unit form? Do we have any strategies in place to prevent subdivision? I might have some later, but I don't want to get ahead of you.
You mean like subdivision of if you're
We
opting in.
remember we talked about this years ago with
I know.
Yeah,
So,
you know it, we know where I'm going.
because you're opting into the incentive program, if you're thinking about mechanisms, we could talk through what those might be. I think if your overall concern is, could they reduce that, subdivide that in the future
Yeah.
and create more units? By its very nature, you'd be violating the terms of the approval if you've resulted in more units or whatever the case may be. But there are mechanisms you could say you're required to keep these units at these sizes or whatever, because it's an incentive program.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, all right, so let me go, because you already answered the question about deed restriction, so I think that's a good conversation to have later. Let's go downtown. When was the last time we actually, and this goes back to the GS AHPP question, when was that last time we actually calibrated the AHPP in lieu fee to what it costs the Housing Trust Fund to produce an affordable unit?
I think it's increased every year on an index, but when was
Yeah,
it?
but what kind of index? Because labor, construction, we're talking like $1 million a door sometimes now.
Well, they do it's not a full when it was last, I'd have to look that up. I don't
Okay.
know that it's been recent.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm asking because, we were talking last time with the missing middle, which relaxing some of that fee could actually get us more units above 120, but below, let's say, 250, right? And that would actually be a contribution to housing diversity in Santa Monica. Is there a chance that before we get red line, we can look at pro forma modeling at, say, like 8, 16, 40 units to understand this SDBL stack, the local bonus with the fee, the local bonus with offsite units, like just so we understand how we'd be calibrating here? It's not a now question, it's a then question. Could we be giving you directions or recommendations of saying, hey, we're going to move forward, but we really need some feasibility studies or some modeling?
Certainly we could, but it's, we could look at the possibility of doing that. My hesitation
Yeah.
is around understanding, feasibility studies are not going to give you all the answers you think. It's just, and I think it's just really important to understand that piece. It's modeling, it's based on a set of factors that don't necessarily reflect the reality, of real estate. Like certainly we could think about how to come up with something, but I do caution kind of relying on, any measure of a feasibility study to sort of give you information needed to.
I would also just point out, currently construction and development is tough at the moment. It would be
It's
kind of
sky
hard
high.
to
Yeah, I
use
don't know what.
current
Yeah.
factors to give a really
Yeah.
global view of what it could be 5 years from now, a year from now. I mean, we see things not getting built now for those reasons.
Right.
It'd be difficult. I'm sure it'll come out saying much is not feasible.
So I guess the thing is that my instinct, and we can come back to this in discussion, is my instinct, this is really interesting at 6 to 19 units. I think you're solving a real problem in that space. I think above 19 units, you're competing with other programs, and it would be really helpful to understand what that what that competition, it goes back to my question of like, how many parcels are we really doing this for? I am concerned, I'll just float this as a question, unless I misunderstood you, when I did research on missing middle, I came to understand that SDVL is totally stackable unconditionally, that we can't lock up SDVL, we can't condition it on anything, we can't condition it on a fee payment or something else. So I'm a little worried about, I just flagged that as a question.
I don't think we believe that, because I think this is when you create a local incentive program.
Yeah.
That's saying if you choose to do, like, you're opting out. I mean, the HPP pilot program is structured exactly that way,
Okay.
where you're opting into something, and if you are choosing this program, then you have chosen not to do that, because we're creating essentially like something, a special local program.
So then we'd be doing it under HPP, which has precedent. I think I'd just be worried about opening a new door. I just think it's a question worth asking.
No, we've asked and answered that.
Okay, no, okay, that's fine, that's fine. All right, moving to the city-owned sites. Can we maximize affordability here? I mean, that's the old conversation about 4-5 in Arizona, about some of the other spots.
So because it's a city-owned site, I mean, it's really, ultimately, it's the council that makes the decision. The idea of exempting it from the zoning ordinance is like, we're just not placing artificial constraints.
Okay.
On public property. And I think we found in the past, it does make it challenging sometimes when you have to consider uses and zoning and what have you. It just allows the flexibility, to ensure that it meets the goals without, applying rules that weren't really thinking about, right? City-owned property, or was really thinking like the vast majority of private property. So that's really the kind of principle behind that.
Okay.
I would add that, I mean, unlike the housing element programs that already exempted city-owned sites that have a certain amount of affordable housing from the zoning ordinance, this would move to exempt any project essentially from the zoning ordinance to better, give us the most flexibility on how to use our land if that doesn't necessarily mean housing.
And then you're operating outside the zoning ordinance in a new program that's contractual.
And
Yes.
and
you're
the
writing your own
council would
rules.
be
Okay,
the one
fine.
to
Yeah.
determine the.
Okay.
Can I take your invitation to do?
Yeah, please do.
Are you proposing that this be predicated upon like a list of city-owned parcels, or like the thing you're going to propose is because the city owns it, like city-owned land is exempt from the zoning ordinance?
Yeah.
Or these city-owned parcels?
No, any.
Wow, interesting. Okay, like parks
Well, in the downtown,
in the downtown.
yeah.
Jump in, yeah. Yeah.
So is the rationale that since any development that would happen on that city-owned parcel would involve some sort of a contract that the council would act on anyway?
Absolutely, yeah.
That you wouldn't need to separately regulate it?
Right, exactly, yeah. I mean, any transfer, disposition of public property requires an agreement. I mean, there's a giant public process that comes with that, so it just is, having the zoning ordinance kind of like lay over that doesn't really make a lot of sense, just because it's just a different process, and allows, I think, the maximum flexibility to ensure that we're able to do things, to invite different proposals and things like that, which may involve housing and non-housing, right? It could be both, and it's just really allowing, not putting those artificial constraints, on how that property can be best used.
So I'm gonna come back to the question later on the downtown gateway sites, on some land uses, some thoughts there. But let let me go on to fair housing because I have some real concerns there, particularly if we do a feasibility, like if we do actually look at where these parcels are. Our housing element obligates us to move housing into high opportunity areas, do place-based investment in lower opportunity areas and do displacement protection. These are not tradable. Can we talk about the Boulevard low scale and which those advance and which they threaten? I will just sort of flag that I have a concern that the low scale program ends up intensifying PICO in a way that we may not want to do.
Yeah, and I think that's the question around geographic eligibility
Yeah.
was actually the driver behind that question. Are there certain areas of the city where perhaps you would not want to activate this kind of incentive? Was really what we were thinking through. Not even just PICO. Could there be other areas, where we have that concern? However, I will say, again, the genesis of this was from the realignment plan was a kind of like, how can we incentivize a different kind of transition and compatibility to neighborhoods where right now there is, quite literally no local control, over that, right? So can you create an incentive program that could result in a different, scale kind of development? So it is, I understand like what you're saying.
Where I'm going, right? And what I'm
But-
seeing is
Yeah.
a program that reduces boulevard heights precisely in the neighborhoods where we're supposed to be delivering housing. I'm trying to understand how HCD is going to read that program. If we're opting into reduced heights on Wilshire, Santa Monica Boulevard in general, and GC, even if it's opt-in, it's still,
I mean, I guess that was what I was
optics
gonna
aren't
say.
great.
It is a opt-in. By no means it is a must-do. The base standards would still be in place. Someone could absolutely not opt in and do a project that you're seeing right now with double density. It's just if they found that this incentive worked for them, they would be opting in. We're not forcing them. It's like we said in the beginning,
Okay.
this is not a down zone.
It's another tool in the toolbox.
fair. I mean, I'm just floating these concerns that I think we need to be working through. And I think it could be good to ask HCD for some thoughts. But, it also raises the question of whether this idea of transfer of height whether some of these height options couldn't be transferred out of the NC or out of PICO, right? There might be an opportunity to relieve pressure there by allowing some sort of a height transfer. Let's go to commercial. This is a larger question, but other than in the city-owned sites where I know we are allowed to introduce some kind of form of commercial rent control, what are our protections against displacement of historic commercial tenants if we're bringing this program and it lands hardest on the boulevards with 1- and 2-story buildings where we have the longest standing commercial tenants who stand to be displaced?
I'm sorry.
If I drive Pico Boulevard,
Okay.
right, I see a whole bunch of single-story buildings that are ripe for this program. They are currently occupied by tenants, commercial tenants, running neighborhood-facing businesses that have been here for decades. They are not owners. Some of them might be, but by and large, they're not owners of their properties. And so
It's
they're.
our old neighborhood commercial issue.
It's our old neighborhood commercial issue. I'm asking if we have a tool to, like, if this is an opt-in program, how do we protect them?
How is that different than the circumstances right now, I guess?
Well,
Well-
this commission had a lot of problem with even the circumstances as they are now.
Right.
Because whenever there's redevelopment in one of these local neighborhood commercial districts, the new ground floor commercial spaces are going to be large undivided spaces to the building. As you recall, maybe, I really thought that we should require developers to subdivide those spaces so that lower income, smaller businesses could afford to move in. But if all of the development and build out of these spaces is on the onus of the tenant, then we're never going to get these small local businesses back. It's just not feasible for them. And so we end up destroying our local neighborhood commercial districts And I think it's a horrible problem. And displacing those businesses, especially in the neighborhood commercial districts, where they're really dependent on the small, affordable spaces that have to do with that are created by the older building stock. It's the same kind of displacement that is unfair and, as displacing people from their homes.
And I think there's an opportunity to study this further, right? Because our citywide large floor plate box vacancy rate is pretty high, right? Anybody can tell that by walking, parts of downtown. So you're in a paradox, right? You can't. There's a ton of large vacancies, those kinds of vacancies. But then when you're doing the redevelopment, the pressure is to build those. And, your financing is dependent on some pro forma that says you're going to get another Trader Joe's or another gym or whatever it is. But you lose the appliance repair guy, you lose the barber, you lose the tailor, you lose the, right?
I mean, I will say that
Can
I
I,
think.
can I just ask a quick question? Is there anything in state density bonus law or in SB 79 that seeks to protect ground level retail in any kind of way?
No, I mean, both of those are about production of housing, not retention of commercial. So, no.
So that's the law of the land at the moment. So is there anything that Santa Monica can do within state law that would
So this is
speak
what
to
I was
this?
trying, I think like we're talking about two like related, but to be frank, very different issues, right? One is around like production of housing and like scale of new construction. The other one is how to incentivize essentially keeping our legacy businesses, small local owned businesses. That, I'm going to be very honest, probably goes like well outside of a land use and zoning context. Like there are many, certainly other economic development tools that you can put in place to try incentivize and help people stay in business. And like there are other levers certainly the city could activate with respect to that. And I think we are sort of looking into that with, the stand up of a new economic development fund and sort of, a restorative justice fund even, in some of these areas as you're naming, PICO as a, with some of our longstanding businesses. Now, I understand what you're saying with respect to this program or the ideas around it, and it's a fair statement, but I do wonder like what is different, because right now the standards are what they are, and if the concern is this will incentivize like faster turnover of parcels that otherwise wouldn't have turned over, then that's a core question, right? And it's why we asked a question in the discussion around like, what is the geographic applicability? Because if there are overarching concerns around whether an incentive program like this would tip the scales to redevelop and displace these sorts of businesses where you don't want that to happen, maybe it's a reason not to activate it there, given that the standards, the baseline standards that have been in place hasn't actually resulted in any new, redevelopment. Now that can be for any myriad of reasons, so I don't know what that's telling us per se, right? Right. Other than like, is there anything in this program that sort of like moves the needle in terms of a susceptibility of a site to redevelopment? I don't know that we know exactly the answer to that.
Right. So the question is, right, what is the goal? I don't think redevelopment is the goal. I think that the goal is sort of a healthy community. And I'm reminded of, the work that I do off the dais, right, in philanthropy. There was a moment when, these big, let's say, wealthy families that have made their money in extractive technologies that have terrible health side effects, and then their charities are all building hospitals and funding healthcare, and then the G3, the grandkids wake up and they go to the family meeting and they say, wait a second, we're making money making people sick, and then we're giving money away to treat them. What if we actually stopped making money by making people sick, right? So I understand that it's not in the zoning ordinance, that this commercial displacement problem sits somewhere else, but I also understand that that is a bug, not a feature in how we make policy in California. and that we need to do more holistic planning. And so it raises the question of whether we can study down the line, if this is an opt-in program, what if we study, for example, smaller floor plates as a condition of the opt-in, which then forces the developer to do a pro forma that maybe shows they make just as much money from the small floor plate as they do from the unrented large one, right? But because we've required, or more, because we've required them to do the math, that if we didn't require them to do, they'd never figure out. So I'm opening the question, because if we're going to do an opt-in program, I think the first principle of an opt-in program has to be to do no harm. So let me then, last set of questions, which is it's not even set, it's one big one, which is just around the impact fees. Are you satisfied that a 50% discount on impact fees is not going to run afoul of all kinds of state and federal and recent Supreme Court decisions about what justifies an impact fee? And, we had the conversation last time about the transportation impact fee and disaggregating it. Are there opportunities here beyond this program to reconsider some of our fee structures in order to make both this program and other programs both more viable and more defensible?
I'm going to give you a legal answer, which says it really depends, and it's fact specific. With respect to impact fees, I know that you are aware that there's been recent Supreme Court decisions that have come down, and those still need to be analyzed at the local level of how a program like this would be affected by that. Those are really based on the reasonable relationship to the fee to what it is supposed to be servicing. And that is a very fact-specific inquiry, which was actually what was at issue in the Sheets case. So we hear that concern and we will take a look at that, but it will be very fact-specific.
Okay. Thank you. Those are all my questions. I have a lot of comments later. Okay. Any other questions?
So I have a couple of just quick clarifications primarily on the downtown and the city-owned land items related to height. I think you answered one of my questions when you responded to Commissioner Fresco regarding that transfer of height, which is really just talking about increasing the height across the board in downtown, not transferring it from somewhere else.
So you're talking about the excluding the the city-owned sites in the downtown from the zoning ordinance? Is that what you?
No, regarding height.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's really not a transfer, it's just a increase.
That's why we called it like an offset. Ultimately, to incentivize more development in the downtown, maybe the increase in height we give would correspond to kind of the opt-in boulevard reduction in height.
Understood. There are two locations where you talk about specific height increases. I think it's like a 10 to 20 foot increase in downtown. And then you talk about a 135 foot height limit for, I think it's the gateway of the city-owned sites. Was there some basis for that? Or did you, based on your past experience, or was that just pulled out of my hat?
The 130 foot height actually already exists in the downtown community plan for kind of our large scale sites. So we kind of use that as the basis of there's already kind of a recognition of that height requirement for those larger sites, those high priority, better utilized sites. So was just where the kind of maybe the suggestion came from.
I think on the second slide on your downtown incentive program, I just want to make sure I understood something on the right side that talks about the draft concept for you make a distinction between on-site and off-site. Because from my reading of it, according to number 3, we're actually incentivizing off-site more than on-site. Did I understand that right?
I think we were just on the proposed concept. We didn't want to eliminate the ability for someone to still do the on-site option. By all means, I think that would be great. Really, I think this concept was introducing paying the in lieu fee or the off-site and still reaping the benefits of state or a local-esque state density bonus, even though you were not providing the on-site units. This similarly kind of aligns with the HPV pilot program that was recently adopted to essentially, I think Rachel's also wanting to chime in on this.
Yeah, also with the, as city planning manager said, with the on-site, they could also utilize the second density bonus. Whereas if they just paid the off-site fee, they wouldn't, or off-site or paid the fee, they wouldn't be able to utilize the second density bonus of 50%.
Right. But I was actually confused, if you can just clarify this, I was confused that the percentage of incentive you're getting is actually higher. So it seems like an encouraging more.
Yeah, I can see the reason why it's 15% to 80% AMI or lower is because usually for off-site, they, in order to qualify for tax credit funding, LIHTC funding, it has to be lower income.
Okay, great. All right, appreciate it. One last question, which is sort of more conceptual regarding the boulevard concept. Because it seems, I'm struggling a little bit in understanding the match between the goals and what's being discussed. From the name of the program, it would seem that the primary objective is to reduce heights on those boulevards. But we've also thrown in the idea of trying to incentivize larger homes, essentially. And I'm wondering whether tying those two together, I was wondering what the rationale was for tying those two together, making it even more difficult ultimately for getting those projects built. Because on the one hand, promoting larger units is something that isn't necessarily something we want to restrict just to boulevards. It could be anywhere in the city, right?
I think some of the suggestion, and I hear what you're saying, that if you're doing a smaller building, will be even more difficult to provide those larger units. I mean, yeah, possibly, because they would limit the amount of units in that building if they were all larger. I think the concept was really coming from, we want to get something in return as well. And we've kind of heard from both the commission and council this kind of desire to find ways to get larger units. And since this is an opt-in program, it could be something that we would not allow someone to kind of waive their way out of, like we're seeing a lot in our density bonus. That is typically the first incentive people ask for, is to don't do any 3 bedrooms. So the concept, I think, was to try to maybe achieve some of these bigger units, but I think we hear you that there could be a kind of a double-edged sword with that.
Right, yeah. So I think those answers my questions. I'll leave my other comments for later.
Okay, Commissioner Wasserman.
Yeah, well, first a background question, just to confirm, housing is currently allowed in all of the zones that are issued?
Yes.
Can you talk about, there was a change to the definition of high-rise like last year under local code. What happened, and does that have a play in here?
Yeah, sure. Deputy City Attorney Michelle Hugard. So previously in Santa Monica, we had a local amendment to our building code, which capped, it basically made a high-rise building, which has certain requirements under the building code, to kick in at 55 feet, and that had been long-standing. Last year, the City Council made the choice to align our local definition with state law. So the state law definition of 75 feet kicks in. So there's no local change. Santa Monica is now aligned with the state building code.
And then, also for other people on the dais, what's the cutoff at which you have to go to all steel construction as opposed to wood construction? And it gets way more expensive.
You mean the height?
Yeah.
I want to say it's
85?
I know,
It's
I
around
don't
the
know.
same.
Somewhere around 8 stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't think there's a height. It's really kind of based on the building construction and what you're constructing out of.
Talking about like construction type, and we've actually talked through a lot with construction professionals on this. There's no hard and fast rule where like now you shall become
Right.
steel.
And I think that's why you see like people either go with that 8 feet or they need to go to 20, because doing 10 to kick it into that just isn't enough to then offset that.
But isn't it a building code requirement at some point?
Yes, I think that's why I'm just explaining, I think that's why you aren't seeing kind of those, let's call them just mid-rise, if you will, because it's either you stay under one height to do not steel, or you got to go significantly higher to offset the expense of steel.
talk to me about current proposed housing, entitled housing projects and their height. Do we have, what range of heights are we seeing?
I think predominantly we are seeing probably around that 8-story, again, for that reason that I just kind of explained, but we are seeing up to 28 in some. I think that's still the minority, if you will. But it kind of also depends if they're doing 1 density bonus, are they doing 2 density bonuses? So there's a range we are seeing.
Yeah. So then we'd emailed about this, but I want to ask, so AB 1287 is a second 50% density bonus. So if you were to take an offsite version, offsite HPP either as proposed or in the current pilot, you could not then use that second density bonus.
That is correct. So AB 1287 requires you to first maximize the first bonus before you get the second bonus. So if you did, your complete, you would only be getting the 1 bonus than if you just did all your offsite units, or if you did your HPP, you wouldn't be eligible for 1287 because you didn't actually provide a first bonus.
Okay, because offsite doesn't count.
Exactly.
Okay. I think my last question, you all covered some of it, is just on the gateway sites. I guess I'm confused. So one is city-owned, which is kind of covered by the city-owned one. One is the Pierside Hotel, that's an operational hotel. I don't know their finances. But are we just talking about redeveloping the Sears site? I mean, it feels like we're really getting narrow, almost spot zoning, to say the word. I don't know.
No, I don't think, I mean, I think we were taking a concept, that is already in the DCP, so we're not inventing something new. And it may have predated you, but there actually was a proposal to redevelop the Pierside Hotel a while ago, actually. They didn't move forward with it. So it doesn't, I don't think we weren't thinking about it that way, for sure, but we were just trying to be consistent with an idea and a concept that was already in the DCP.
Is the Sears landmarked? I ask me.
It is most
Sears is
definitely
alive.
landmarked, and I was saving that for my comments.
That's it.
Okay. I don't have, most of my questions were answered. I do have comments, but because we have some requests for speaking, let's get right into public comment. These are late chits, so do I have a motion to hear?
So move.
For 2 minutes, I'll second. Motion to hear them for 2 minutes each.
Can we first have a motion to?
Nina,
Okay.
We agree.
I'd
We
like
agree.
to have a motion to give them the full amount of time.
I move to give them the full amount of time.
that's
you.
fine, second.
All right.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Can we have Lauren Block and Heather Thomason come to the forward, please?
In a minute, Commissioner.
We're just going to kind of talk together, and mostly he's going to talk, so.
Hi. We just wanted to, first of all, recognize and thank, we're with the Neighborhood Task Force. It's a 501c4 that we formed in November of 2025 in response to some of the loss of local control and a desire to give neighbors a voice in the development process in the community. And we just, first of all, want to recognize and thank city staff and the council for adopting the realignment plan. We in the Sunset Park community were particularly appreciative of two particular points in the realignment plan that you're now in the process of trying to figure out how you can implement. And that was to focus some of the anticipated density into the downtown area and the gateway, where it's most proximate to the E-line and most proximate to our centers of commerce and employment. That's just good planning. And to relax a little bit the profile of buildings along our neighborhood commercial boulevards, our mixed-use boulevards, such that they transition in respect and in scale the existing lower density neighborhoods in the community. So we just want to say thanks, that's encouraging, because it's kind of a difficult spot for folks to be when they don't feel they have a voice. And we also just want to let you know that we've been conducting some research with transportation engineers, legal counsel, and development consultants, just like you, to try and get a handle on all of this. And we're going to deliver a white paper that might produce or provide you with yet some additional options with respect to how you can proactively achieve some of these objectives that you're talking about tonight. In particular, we're looking at the alignment of the city's density bonus law with the states and seeing if there are ways to, within that framework, respect state density bonus law and also more closely align the result with the intention that's been expressed in the loose for a more moderate profile that relates better to the single-family neighborhoods. So Heather Thomason, a member of our board, and myself and other members of our boards will be speaking with you in the future. And we just want to say thanks. So thank you. We, by the way, support increased housing supply so that we can bring people who might otherwise be excluded from our community back into it and further diversify it. We also want to be thoughtful about our existing residents and find that balance. So thank you.
We have two chits. Are both of you going to be speaking? Okay. All right.
Oh, was that 2 minutes? I thought
We
I
almost went into extra time.
I thought I droned on for 4 then and more.
That was
So I think we've said everything we need to say.
great.
Your time's valuable and we want to respect it.
Thank you.
So thanks to all of you.
Okay, we have no other public comment, so we can now move into open discussion. All right,
Can I?
you are now set loose for open discussion.
For ranting. Okay, so the first thing I want to say is I want to pick up on the item that was removed because let's just say if this is my last in-person planning commission meeting, I will reminisce about having joined the planning commission 8 years ago and taking up the mantle of my predecessor, Jennifer Kennedy, who with Anastasia Foster was fighting to protect the city from the short-term rental corporate housing situation that had been really impacting our housing stock. And, until we got a generally applicable ordinance, there was this ritual where the applicant for the DR would come and then they would make their pitch, and then I would ask the question if they would voluntarily covenant to avoid short-term, to require a minimum 1-year lease and unfurnished apartments. And it got so ritualized that by the end, someone like a Dave Rand would finish his presentation with, and yes, Commissioner Landris, we volunteer to do this, right? So, when I saw that, my hackles went up, obviously, and I think that staff was right to pull that language. That having been said, the letter we got from Andrew Swerdloff I thought was extremely interesting. I've always felt that a commercial lodging zoning definition where we could actually define the need and then regulate it through a permit process where you have people who need to stay near a hospital because of, they're supporting a family, in need, or someone who's displaced by a catastrophe, whether massive like the Palisades or not. We have people living in Santa Monica who are still legally registered to vote in the Palisades because this is not where they consider their home. We could sort of like legalize and regulate, right? So I want to encourage staff to look at that. I also want to encourage staff to look at that in the context that a lot of our recent state housing legislation explicitly excludes hotel uses. You can't SB 79 with a hotel. You can't do a lot of these things with a hotel. What would it look like? How much money could we make as a city, and how could we protect our housing stock if smack dab in the middle of that opt-in program were a handful of corporate lodging units that were part of the commercial portion of the building, not the residential portion of the building? It would provide a real incentive for someone to come into that program because they literally can't go to SB 79 with a hotel. And we would actually meet a need, and if we had the right zoning definitions and the right sort of, this is not a tenancy protection, we could actually write a program that would be meet a need, control a problem, so we disincentivize the like Airbnb, the secret Airbnb conversions, because we'd use a permitting process to make sure that these were above board businesses, and then actually essentially help the housing on top of it, the real housing, pencil. So that's a first comment. I think the parcel universe problem is a real issue. So I would like to see, when we do a motion or direction, I'm going to talk about this. I really would like to see a parcel universe analysis so we understand what we're really doing, particularly post July 1. So where are people going to? Where does this program beat the state density bonus? Where does it beat SB 79? I'd like to narrow our scope to where 55 feet is a real lift over current zoning, so we're not down zoning. We obviously need to clean up the family size language we're talking about 2 and 3 bedroom houses. I think we could create some minimum floor areas. I mean, in order to prevent these pods, I think there are some things that we could do. We could have minimum floor area, 850 square feet for 2 bedroom, 1,100 square feet for 3 bedroom. We could have bedroom definitions. We could talk about, internal lock limitations. We could talk about the number of kitchens per unit, how many mailboxes, how many utility meters, how many primary entries. We can maximize the number of bedrooms per unit. And then we can have a single lease requirement if we're talking about a rental. So, those are things that are not about what's happening inside the apartment. They're all about the form, and they could help protect us. We've talked about this years ago. I remember the conversation with Mario Fonda Bernardi on the dais when we were looking at a unit mix that looked suspiciously subdividable, and we were all concerned about that. Definitely support the 200% AMI ownership. I believe that if we trade, I said it last time, I'll say it again, we will do well to trade HPP fees that generate a fraction of a unit in exchange for real savings that get us workforce housing. And it would be amazing if we could have a Boulevard version of the program and an R2, R1 version of the program. The downtown housing program is fantastic. Where I do want to go is the ratchet structure. I really think that we need to move the density bonus and the HPP relief on a unit by unit basis, so that we're actually trading as we get what we want. I talked about this last time. It's the Portland model on the housing side, but imagine you pay the in lieu fee only, standard fee, 25 to 35% local density bonus, 2 concessions, standard waivers. That's going to work for 6 to 19 unit projects where you can't do on-site. If you're doing off-site or hybrid, you do 15% off-site at 80%, or a smaller on-site mix with a reduced fee, 50% bonus, 3 concessions, limited waivers. If you want to build on-site at the standard HPP mix, you get a full state equivalent 50% bonus, unlimited waivers, 3 concessions, and plus however you work out the, that The rationalized impact fees, I'm not
Are
even
you
going
going to give that list to staff? 'Cause
I will give that list.
You're just rattling this
No,
off.
I will give that.
And
I'm-
nobody's following.
Sorry,
just so you know.
thank you. My point is, we don't, sorry, thank you. My point,
being
I'm
honest.
reading my notes. No, you're good. My point is this, we give when we get, not we give density and hope that they build the unit size we want. We give the density when we're getting the unit size that we want, or the unit count that we want, or the unit mix that we want. And we give away HPP fees when we're getting the affordability mix that we want. That's the principle. Sorry, it's like, you're right, it's too detailed. My point is, don't give away the store and hope they build to it. Give them each step and let the developer tell you what they want to build, because depending on their costs, their design, somebody's going to come in with an 11-unit project with one thing, somebody else is going to come in with a 17-unit project, something else, and not every version of the plan, right? The ratchet allows them to customize. I do want more affordability on city-owned sites. That is a long-standing conversation. We should never go below 25%, which is the Surplus Land Act floor, on 10 units or more. And then we do the ratchet again, and we take advantage, as you say, Ross, of going outside the zoning ordinance. Let's get what we need. And let's avoid the commercial displacement too. Let's add commercial rent control on the commercial sites. Let's do the small floor plates in the downtown. I mean, how amazing would it be on the Sears site, for example, to have this housing mix with a beautiful building that has small. Sears, right, a beautiful building. We are next to the Sears. We're in the parking lot next to the Sears with a site that has small floor plates so that all the people who live there can go on site to their tailor or their barber or, you know, whatever it is that they're looking for.
All they look for is gyms today.
Fine, they can have the large floor plate for the gym. They can walk up the promenade and go to the gym and get their, well, they don't need to have their parking validated because they won't have a car.
Right.
I'm worried about the AFFH. I really don't want to downzone the 70-foot boulevards. I don't want to remove capacity, even opt-in on the boulevards. We have to do anti-displacement protections that look like SB 330, that look like SB 79 or more. 3-year tenant occupancy lookbacks, 7-year lookbacks on multi-unit, no net loss of rent-controlled units, right of return, and we need to figure out a way to do that legally with commercial tenants as well in exchange for the small floor plates. Again, we need to say 2 and 3 bedroom, and I really, really want to encourage the AFFH analysis in general. There is real risk on Pico, Maine, Montana, Ocean Park. We had this conversation 5 years ago. I don't want to have this conversation again. I won't be around to have it, but I don't want to have it.
You can still come up.
I can come and give public comment. Yeah, right. And let's look at the 15,000 square foot lot consolidation cap in order to incentivize those small floor plates. There are other things I can send to staff some notes. And then lastly, the impact fees. I proposed a disaggregated transportation impact fee. To me, this is a ripe opportunity to split the car fee from the everything else fee, because it will lower costs for no parking projects in the downtown in particular. And that could actually be a real incentive. But, you know, let's have the per space vehicle impact fee and the per bedroom multimodal impact fee. And we'll do much better there. So those are my comments, and I can help build a motion later.
Yes, thank you. I think I can keep mine brief. For the Boulevard low scale concept, I did have some difficulty wrapping my mind around the approach, and I do feel that trying to combine the goals of reducing height as well as increasing larger units may just make it very difficult to accomplish anything. I think my suggestion is that we pick what the primary goal is and try to focus on that. I think the notion of encouraging larger units is something we should consider citywide, not just on a single corridor, and that may have its own challenges. As it relates to the encouraging larger units, I think that was one of the questions that you asked. I do believe that we should establish some sort of a minimum percentage for those units if we do provide an incentive. And I guess that should be guided by some analysis of the financial impacts. Regarding downtown in general, I'm supportive of the concept of increasing height. And in order to be able to really encourage or to sort of surmount any of the other challenges that we're seeing with regard to development in downtown, I think providing a height increase makes a lot of sense in that location, and we should approach it with as open an approach as possible. Regarding the city-owned sites, I think I'm generally cautiously supportive of the idea of exempting city-owned sites from some of the zoning regulations, but I do have concerns about trying to make sure that subdivision regulations remain in place for those situations as well. Lastly, with regard to the AHPP changes as incentives, in general, I'm concerned about that. It does seem like we are on a pathway to essentially gut the program, where we would end up with very little affordable housing. I did see that there's been comments in the past about the idea that requiring affordable units either on-site or off-site, that there's no real evidence that that works. But on the contrary, I think similarly, there isn't really evidence that shows that locally, when you increase the housing supply, that it actually makes housing more affordable either. So the main point being that we have limited control on what incentives and regulations we can actually provide locally. And I think we should be very cautious about giving away the ones that we can. As I think someone else said, there are many other factors at play that are preventing housing development from happening right now. And I think the city should look at advocating for changes that may not be achievable at the local level to try to affect that, which might actually prove to be more effective.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I have some comments. Kind of high level, kind of generally speaking, I do like the thrust of what you're proposing. I think in general, we as a planning commission have sought to put housing along the boulevards, but incentivize housing in the highest of density housing in downtown Santa Monica. I think that's consistent with that. I say this in recognition of the fact that state density bonus law is ultimately, always probably going to be the fallback plan. I'm skeptical that the incentives that we're putting forth, although well-intentioned, are going to be enough of an incentive to deter a developer from a higher density SB 79 or density bonus project along the boulevards. But I'm willing to have the conversation, and I'm willing to see if it can work. And so we don't know unless we ask the question. And so I support at least the process that you're trying to put forth. I think at the end of the day, what I am seeing here is this is really a proposal at the margins that's going to probably encourage higher density for sale projects in downtown Santa Monica, which I'm in support of. Otherwise, you saw density bonus law kind of canceling out whatever benefits you would try to bring along the boulevard. So the real kind of mover here is, I do think you're going to encourage hopefully higher density, higher height kind of downtown for sale projects. And to that end, I'm willing to entertain the idea of a pilot program where we would waive AHPP fees for for sale projects that have 2 to 3 bedroom units. Do on a very limited basis in a pilot program. And for me to really understand what the trade-offs are, I need to know what's in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and what the projection is for GS dollars into that trust fund. Because if Measure GS is providing $10 for every $1 of AHPP that we're getting for sale that we'd be giving up, that's a fair trade-off for me, but unless I can see that, I don't know. And honestly, right now, 100% of 0 is 0. So I'm willing to look at a pilot program to see if that's enough incentive to build for sale. I do like the idea, we didn't talk about it a lot, of public-private partnerships on city-owned land. I'm curious to see what proposals we have out there already in the mix. The city of Santa Monica, I'll say generally speaking, we're at a deficit right now. We have a downtown that's significantly underperforming other downtowns. My wife and I just went out to downtown Culver City and had a great time. I'd love it if Santa Monica had something like that. So our downtown is underperforming, and we need to find a way thoughtfully to maximize the residual value back to the city for ongoing fees for developments on city-owned land in downtown. I have a critique of what happened with parking structure 3 and how that was structured. There could have been ways for the city to ground lease that land, still build the same number of affordable housing units and market rate units, and still extract some kind of ongoing ground lease from the developer. It would have entailed a much higher more height and more density, but we're talking about that right now for downtown. So although I applaud the affordable housing being built there, the city didn't get enough out of that deal. And I'd like to see that change, especially for these larger parcels like on 4th in Arizona. And I do, of course, like the Gateway Cities idea. The kiss and ride lot, I think, is one you guys have the most control over. So be as creative as you can be with that. And don't tear down the Sears building.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you. Commissioner Wasserman.
Yeah, thanks. First, I know it was off the slides, but I gotta say, my first apartment in Santa Monica, my wife had a fellowship at Rand. It was 3 months long. We looked for a place that was less than a year. We found a landlord that gave us a lease that was started month to month. And now I know that was an illegal lease, so I'm not going to out the guy's name. That let us move to Santa Monica. And I know there's a huge concern with Airbnbs, but I don't know. There is space, as this common letter we got, to have intermediate term leases. I'll just leave it there. Heights. I think that the proposal to increase the height through this incentive program for downtown is good, but I think we run into the problem that you identified that, like, if you're moving to steel construction, you need more height to make that make sense. Otherwise, if you just give a little more height, it's either A, not going to work, or B, it's going to be ultra luxury to make it make sense. So if you're going to go, let's go. And I mean, I say that because, like, there's discussion in this of neighborhood character fitting with the neighborhood. I was at a hotel in Dallas. We were going to see the eclipse, and there was this abstract image on the wall of a beach and a city next to it. I didn't know what it was until I saw one building that was clearly 100 Wilshire. And it was like, oh, this is Santa Monica in this random hotel in Dallas. And I say that to say that when we talk about neighborhood character, the character of downtown is tall buildings. So, like, I think we can talk about what incentives make sense, what the conditions are to get that extra height, but, like, why are we stopping at, I guess 85 plus 20, 95, 105? Like, Miami and Honolulu do this, but even closer to here, Long Beach and San Diego, they have thriving downtowns with thriving beaches and thriving tourism and tall buildings. So like, and that tall building comes with whatever percent times the new units of deed restricted affordable or offsite, whatever we end up doing. So like, let's go big with that. That's my thought. Big with FAR, big with height. On the flip side of that, I share Sean's concerns about the 55-foot, but not just for fair housing reasons. Like, I don't agree with the goal. Like, we have agreed that, certain corridors have 70 feet. The density bonus allows you to go over 55 feet, even in the areas that are. And like, the pictures you showed of units are good-looking projects that I think fit in perfectly. Like, why are we trying to incentivize them to go lower? When we do a trade, you say, okay, developer, you get more FAR, say, and in exchange you do more 3-bedroom units, or in exchange you do more deed restriction, whatever. That's a trade. Here, the trade is, you build less. Like, that is not something we want. The trade is we get something bad. So I think you're misreading the realignment plan. Like, I think that the point is we had this deal in the housing element that we're not going to touch R1, we're going to put it on boulevards. And now we're saying, oh, let's build less than even we're entitled to on the boulevards. I just fundamentally don't think that. So I think the requirement should just be what the height is base zoning now, if, honestly, if not higher, because you effectively get that with density bonus. And then kind of last was on this double density bonus, AB 1287. I would like to, if we do end up doing a downtown thing where you get the offsite, kind of like the pilot, I'd like to see that second density bonus incorporated somehow, either offsite. I don't know how those moderate income units are going to go. There's issues with that. Or you can take the second one offsite and do the second one on site, the moderate income units, and the first one offsite. And we'd have to create, obviously, the local structure for that to happen. But the density bonus works. It creates deed restricted affordable units and market rate units. It's a win-win. So I don't think we should make a development choose between taking 2 density bonuses or doing offsite. We should give them the second density bonus either on or offsite, even if they take a more flexible AHPP option. So, I mean, I don't know if we're still going through the questions. I have specific ideas, but that's kind of what I'll just add that on the proposal to exempt city-owned sites from on the proposal to exempt city-owned sites from the zoning ordinance, that sounds great. I would caveat that I'd like it written in that open space, it doesn't apply to things zoned open space, and I know that downtown doesn't include like Palisades Park, right? I think I'd still like it written in just in case there ever is a park made in downtown in the future. I don't want to touch the parks, but other than that, it's a good idea.
Commissioner Fresco kindly allowed me to say 2 things, and there will be violence if I go over. To Commissioner Wasserman's point, number 1, this works if we can get the R3 construction model moved through more quickly. So we're not built, like if we're talking about the smaller units, we have to have simpler construction requirements. And the second thing is, and I think you just like a light bulb went off in my head. Where are the offsites going to go? They're going to go on the city-owned sites. So why not connect them? Why not actually connect the programs so that they add up to actual offsite affordable on city-owned property?
And that's how we pay for it.
And that's how we pay for it. Yeah.
That was really short. That was the shortest thing you ever said.
I'm learning. As I'm leaving, I'm learning.
In general, love you. I have some anxieties about all of these kind of stab in the dark programs we keep coming up with and then adding permanently to our code. We used to, in a different economic universe, be able to shape what we wanted, and people really wanted to be here, and so they paid the price and we got it. And that was really cool. So I'm a little uncomfortable now. So what Josh said about pilot program, that made me much more comfortable with trying something for a short amount of time, letting a project or two come through and see how we like it. Not like the pilot program we did for those billboards, which was not a 30-year pilot program, but a real pilot program. So that's one thought. You know, I'm very uncomfortable with, as I said before, waiving of AHPP, and I actually agree with Jacob about, I'm not sure what we're trying to achieve by trying to get people to build less on the boulevards. When we did the upzoning, you know, we spent a lot of time, I personally spent a lot of time driving up and down boulevards, looking at what was there, looking where we could put this housing where we wouldn't displace people, and feeling comfortable that this was the way to do it so that we helped people and didn't hurt them. So, you know, I was also, on the same note, very adamant that we should truly protect neighborhood commercial districts. So perhaps this is an opportunity for that. So a pilot program using a lower density incentive for neighborhood commercial districts actually kind of makes sense in my mind. In terms of so-called family size units, by which we mean 2 and 3 bedroom units, what we really want is actual families of all different kinds. And to do that, we need to use form-based zoning and limit the size of those units, which we've discussed here many times over the past couple months. So, you know, the 800 to 1,200 square foot model, the 1,200 being the 3-bedroom version. I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm trying to go in order of, so in terms of the gateway, I think of all of us here, I've been here the longest as a commissioner, and I remember the gateway well, and was always a little uncomfortable with saying, okay, this is the gateway, this is where we're going to put up a big wall of really tall buildings right after the Ocean Park neighborhood, transitioning through the Civic Center and the high school to the freeway, and then bam, that didn't seem like good city urban design to me, and it still doesn't. So that said, we have a robust transit adjacent area all around those 3 sites, one of which, as has been noted, is a very busy, very tall hotel already, and one of which has a historic landmark on it. So I don't know why we need to go more. On the other hand, the transit adjacent zone and the neighborhood village zone, which actually contains some of our tallest buildings in downtown, are ripe for densification if we need that. And, you know, maybe something like adding 2 floors to those areas, except for Gateway, is enough to, using the state density bonus, make people be able to pay for their steel girders, and maybe something will happen. Maybe we don't have to have this whole huge complicated thing. Maybe we just have to tweak it just a little bit more in a place where we do the least harm and not mess with the other things that we spend so much time balancing. Displacement, neighborhood commercial, sorry. You know, the other thing about the broadness of the program, I guess I already mentioned this before, but, you know, the nexus fees and all that stuff, that really starts messing with all of our other stuff. And we know the housing element and all of these new laws that are coming on down are all about housing. So we're talking about housing, but we're not the laws. We're the Planning Commission for the city of Santa Monica, and we have to always be thinking about our parks and our landmarks and all of our other cultural programs and amenities that we provide our citizens that make them want to move into these units. Doesn't matter how many you build if you're building them in a wasteland where we've lost our art centers and our landmarks and our parks, where we just can't afford to keep them all nice. So I go for balance and tweaking and not just putting big things that we don't really know how they're going to work out. So in general, I would say that I don't really support this plan. In fact, I don't support this plan. And I think that smaller, subtler ways of trying to make the things we're trying to get to happen would be more effective.
Thank you. And I wanted to also add and follow on what Commissioner Wasserman's comments were about the item that was removed for this meeting that was had to do with short-term rentals. I think we can find a way to deal with the Airbnb issue while giving flexibility to leases. And I think as it was written, it was 30 days or more. I think that precludes almost 99% of Airbnbs right there. But, there was a situation where people did need to have short-term housing, especially after the fires. There have been situations where people have flooding in their apartment and have to move out for a few months. There are situations of medical care issues. I mean, it's a complex, dynamic city where we are going to have people who want to come in and do a short-term stay in Santa Monica for whatever length of time that they want to stay here, 2, 3, 6, 8 months, 10 months. There needs to be an option for them. I don't understand the politics or how we got to this the complexity of how we got here in the first place. We don't need to go down that road, but I think that for looking forward now in 2026 in Santa Monica, I think we need to start being a little more nimble and a little more flexible. And I think some of what the decisions that led us to a minimum 1-year lease, if we're not just correcting for the Airbnb problem, I'm not sure if that needs to continue long-term. So I would be supportive of looking at that if it did come back.
Try to build a motion. I don't know if we have, I don't know. I mean, this is a study session. We're expected to pass the ROI. I am not certain that we have 4 votes for an ROI, so we're going to have to figure that out. Are we going for 4 votes or 3 tonight?
We would need 4.
You would need
Still
4,
the majority of the
Okay.
commission, even though there's not 7.
I am curious, Chair, if there's any interest in a straw poll on whether we have 4 votes for the ROI, because I'm on the fence.
Sure, we could take a straw poll.
And can we just clarify, one ROI is for downtown and the other ROI is for the rest of the city? Is that?
No, zoning ordinance and loose.
One is for the zoning ordinance, and then the other one is for the DCP and loose. They're 2 different documents.
The language is identical.
Pretty much,
Just wanted to.
Yes, the goals in them are identical.
Okay.
Because let me just say before we do the straw, I'll just frame this before we do the straw poll. I am really open to this conversation at the Gateway. I'm really open to this conversation on the city-owned sites. I am really uncomfortable with where we are on the, everywhere else. And I don't think it's ready for prime time, and I'd rather have I understand the process of ROIs. I'd rather have an ROI that's aiming in the right direction, that has the kind of constraints around, that has both the intent and the constraints. And I would happily vote for an ROI that's just for the downtown and the city-owned sites.
Can we continue this and ask for a revision of the proposal so that we can feel like we know what we're ROIing?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess continuing and not voting for the RIs would require us to bring this back, because we cannot bring forward a resolution of recommendation without approval of the ROIs, as that is what initiates the amendments.
So let's ask a realistic question here. You're hoping to get this to council by July 14th. I understand that, and I respect the intent. Let us imagine a situation where what you end up delivering to council on July 14th is actually downtown and city owned, and you say, we've got to study the rest more thoroughly. What is the process by which
Yeah, what if we're
we
not
could
ready?
right, like what if, how can we help you move forward the things that we want to move forward and pace the stuff that's
So
not?
I think it's important to, again, like the purpose of an ROI doesn't commit you to do anything, but to talk about it.
Yeah.
That's all it is, right? It doesn't compel you to act or make a recommendation. And the commission does have the full discretion to move some parts and say, you know what, we're not going to do that part, or we're going to do that later, or what have you. There's no obligation. The ROI doesn't obligate you to do anything other than to have a conversation.
Yeah, but if we don't frame the conversation before we have it in a way that we're comfortable with, then maybe we should work on the framing more, is what we want to do.
Well, I think
So
you could-
is July 14th, why is July 14th the day it goes back to council? Do we all turn into pumpkins on July
The
15th?
prisoners rebel and they storm the Bastille and they need
not
to
a-
sleep.
We just put that out there as like an anticipated timeline. There's
So
no,
let's go in August.
nothing magic about it. Yeah, I think when, again, I think just coming back to the ROI, its purpose is just to initiate a process to
We
talk.
know, yeah.
Right? And you don't have to overly shape it. I mean, you certainly can. It's
But
entirely
if
up to
things
you.
move forward
But-
before, like when we have so many notes and we move it forward before we've addressed even our preliminary notes, it gets away from us.
I mean, I think you could hypothetically still approve the ROIs, and, your resolution of recommendation at the moment could only be do only the gateway sites, only the city-owned sites, and our recommendation is to not move forward with the low scale or DCP, and then ultimately is the planning commission's recommendation to the council.
But wouldn't it be better if we had an actual comprehensive plan that did more than just a few pieces and brought that forward?
It's at the discretion of the commission, what you choose to move
Okay.
forward and make a
Commission.
recommendation to council. It's up to you.
There's a real emergency in approach. I'm sensitive to staff's work. I'm sensitive to council direction. There is an actual emergency when it comes to approach 2 on SB 79. It is real. It is actually happening. And staff made very clear to the council on April 28th that it is constrained in its capacity. This is a nice to have, not a need to have. Approach 2 is a need to have. If I were on the council, I would be saying, put this aside until July 14th, go full speed ahead on approach 2 to get that right, and come back to us once that's submitted to HCD. But I'm not council, so
I will say, we are planning on taking approach 2 of SB 79 on July 14th.
Right.
We will be coming to you all sometime in June.
Yeah.
So we feel like we can achieve both in this timeline. I don't think this is going to be what delays approach 2.
yeah, I understand that. No, I'm just,
Well, why don't we talk about it among ourselves and we understand where they stand?
that's a good idea. Eileen, continue.
So
Can we amend or recommend an amendment to the ROI that speaks to the consternation about the 55% height incentive, and then approve everything else?
Well,
'Cause I-
what I'm basically, the ROI is general for us to have a discussion, and we understand that, and it's very broad, and we can discuss whatever, but really what it's leading towards, and when we get to where we discuss it in the next thing, there's usually like draft code, or these are the sections we want, and it gets narrower at that point, once we pass the ROI. So what I'm suggesting is we have a very comprehensive 3-part concept here, and we've given a lot of notes, and maybe if we continue it and come back one more time, and staff can, instead of coming back with the next step of the ROI, come back with a massaged version of this that might work better, and that we might actually want to tweak and send to council. I think this is the time, when we're in the early stage, to create a program, a pilot program.
May I have a solution for you.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay, if we delete from the gosh, I'm looking at them on my screen. So the one that has a resolution that is numbered, if we delete number 2, I'm good, because then it's 1, focusing housing development in the downtown, and 3, maximizing the potential of city-owned sites in the downtown and gateway master plan sites. We simply delete number 2, I don't have a problem voting for it. And then in the other one, which also has numbers but also has letters, we delete B, incentivizing future development along the boulevards, and keep everything else. So if you simply delete,
Can you give a page number?
yeah, I'm on page 7 of the, on resolution 26007, you would delete number 2
Which is on page.
on page, well, it's at the top in all caps, and then it's also on page 6. Yep. And then in resolution 006, yeah, that's the bond before the bond. It's much more awkward. You have the same issue in the all caps because you're going to delete number 2, and then in the what do they call
Yeah,
that?
no,
The operating part.
I think we see it here.
See it, right?
Yeah, yeah. So
And I could vote for it.
I can get comfortable with that. I mean, honestly, I think state density bonus law is going to trump number 2, no matter how you cut it. So it's almost a moot point as far as I'm concerned. It's not worth staff's time. What, it's not, sorry. To look at it, if it's gonna, yeah, what you're, I don't want to speak for you, but you didn't have your microphone on, so what, yeah. So I'm okay with that. If this is part of, because I also want us to be efficient and stick to calendar as best we can. We have a busy agenda. I would rather pass the ROI with either 2 deleted or, yeah, and move on so staff can move on. Just, I mean, I understand it's just an ROI and you're just hearing our feedback, but just to make it more clear,
No,
our
it's fine.
feedback would be
It's
that.
it's without the
yeah.
Boulevard low skill incentive. Yep. That's clear.
And can I just ask, you've made a kind of there's this sort of idea of a trade-off. I think when we come back with an R, right, we could have the conversation about transfer of height and things like that, including transferring height out of places where we didn't think there should have been height in the first place. But it's in service of moving housing development in the downtown. And I think it takes off the pressure to have awkward conversations about Wilshire and Santa Monica that we don't want to have.
And I'll just add real quickly, I mean, I understand the idea of a trade-off. Practically speaking, though, for this trade-off to be real, you need to have a situation where a developer owned land and was ready to develop land in downtown and simultaneously a land on the boulevards, and we can incentivize him or her.
That's not.
No, I know, but like practically speaking, like shifting density from one part of the city to the other, developers are going to look at a site as is, and they're not going to say, oh, I can build more height in downtown, potentially let's go develop in downtown. Like, they're going to try to,
We're just moving capacity for
just saying.
HCD, not for
Correct.
the developers.
We don't care about the developer. We care
Well-
about HCD.
okay, fair point, but I don't think that, I think there's enough, we're already HCD compliant, as is.
Quick question, sorry, just before, in case we move off the topic. So we understand, staff understands that, essentially removing number 2 on page 6 from both of the ROIs, which is in regards to the incentive program along the boulevards. There are other whereases that kind of are in connection to that. So I'd imagine you're just your recommendation is kind of scrubbing the entire ROI that is pertaining to that concept. More than maybe just that one
Yes.
part of that sentence.
So on page 2, the last whereas at the bottom of page 2 would go.
Yeah, there's a couple of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just clarify something though? As I understand it, the staff's discussion of the incentives for the 2 and 3 bedroom units was sort of housed within that item number 2, correct?
Yes.
While I generally support that idea, I do think including in 1 and 3 this idea of encouraging 2, 3 bedroom units is something worth continuing to look at. In other words, not just restricted to the corridors or the boulevards.
Is that,
So the goal of the 2 to 3 bedroom units that was in the part we're scrubbing would be moved to 1 and 3.
1 and 3.
yeah.
Okay.
Can we just take a minute to go through the 2 and just figure out what we're cutting so we're really clear? I'm going down right now, but why don't we all do
Well,
that?
the whereas is,
I think we understand the direction. I don't
Yeah, I
think we
think
need
they
you to
can do
scrub
it.
that.
No, but if we're
that's-
passing it, I just really want to be really clear what we're not passing. That's what I'm sort of
It's
getting at.
essentially number 2, right?
No, but there are whereases, and your point is really well taken, because,
Oh, I see.
right?
well, we've given direction and they're going to, although we
We've
can't
gotta
pass
clean-
it
that's right.
without a,
That's what I'm saying.
I see.
Well,
When did you say?
Yeah, I think.
I think you're going to be better off giving direction on concepts. Let
ones
us
that are
take care of the drafting.
No, but I don't
Yes.
want to pass an ROI that I can't pass. Like, I won't vote for an ROI that has this stuff in it. I just can't. I think it's a problem.
So we're not coming back here until June 17th, is that right?
Apparently not.
Okay.
And Commissioner Andrews, you're looking through the whereas statements for,
I've gone through the whereas statements, and I'm going through the whereas statements, and I'm almost done with the first one.
We're going to miss you so much.
Maybe.
I will say that both of them have substantially similar recitals. The changes are really with the code sections that, deal with the resolution of intention process for zoning ordinance amendments versus general plan amendments. That's going to be where you see the changes.
Right. So if that's the case, then here's what I've got. I'm looking at, well, I just did it on number 7, but I can do it for number 6. But if I walk you through number 7, can you find the whereases in number 6?
Yes.
Okay. So in number 7, we have a redaction in the all caps section because we're removing number 2, right?
So the title, yes.
In the title. And then on page 2, there's the bottom whereas on the whereas that's at the bottom of page 2, and it's a series of whereases that go all the way onto page 3. All of that gets struck, and we pick up again at whereas with the city council's adoption of the budget. That's the whereas stays in place. And then the next whereas, we drop 1B. But nothing else.
can you give a page number?
That's on page 4.
Thank you.
So 1B on page 4 goes away. And then moving on to page 6, we drop number 2. And then moving on to page 7, we drop number 2 again.
sorry, page 6, there are 2 number 2s, correct?
On page 6, there's, oh, yeah, you're right. We dropped both number 2s. No. Sorry, yes, we drop, good point. We drop that whereas, actually. There's a whereas on the bottom of page 5 that's got to go. Good catch, Commissioner. There's a whereas on the bottom of page 5 that talks about housing on the boulevards. That's got to go. All the way through the middle of page 6, because that refers to the boulevards, and it picks up again. So on 5, we end under provided under state density bonus law, semicolon and then we pick up with whereas in line with the goals for maximizing economic potential. Everybody seeing that?
Yes, staff has that.
And then it's the parallel deletions on,
The other resolution.
yeah.
And then all the things that you see that he missed because he's skimming.
Exactly.
I think we understand the intent of.
I know you do.
Okay, I'm just double checking, because it really is similar.
Okay.
What's the difference, Michelle? What's the?
The section where it talks about the initiation of the process, so at the very, very end, it would be page 6 to 7. There are different code sections because the Muni Code has different sections for initiation of the ROI process for general plan amendments versus zoning ordinance amendments.
So it's literally the same except for section 1 pursuant to Santa Monica Municipal Code.
Correct.
Section blank, and they're just two different sections.
Correct.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to move adoption of the two ROIs, which I will name as resolution numbers 26-006 and 26-007, as amended with the redactions noted tonight in both ROIs.
Second.
We have a second.
We can do a vote on, Commissioner Fresco,
Yes.
Commissioner Landris,
Yes.
Commissioner Wasserman.
Yes.
Vice Chair Chaco,
Yes.
Chair Hamilton.
Yes.
And if I may make a second motion in the spirit of efficiency, that is to incorporate the comments of all commissioners tonight, this evening, relative to the ROIs that we just passed, in the spirit of developing the actual resolutions of recommendation. Would there be a second for that motion? Because I don't think we were disagreeing with each other on anything.
No.
So is there a second for that?
I'll second that.
Great. Voice vote, maybe?
Let's do a whole roll call.
Okay.
Just for fun.
Sure.
Commissioner Fresco,
Yes.
Commissioner Landris.
Yes.
Commissioner Wasserman.
Yes.
Vice Chair Chaco,
Yes.
Chair Hamilton.
Yes.
So much fun on the planning commission.
Okay. We're now ready to move on to written communication, opposed 13A.
Move, receive, and file?
What's the proper way?
There's nothing. We just noted.
I think it was just an acknowledgement that there was
thank
a
you.
comment provided
There was a-
kind of off
Yeah.
the
Not on our
agenda,
agenda.
essentially. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can't do
Are
anything.
there any planning commissioner discussion items?
Just the usual brief. This is research on surveys of people who evacuated from the Palisades fire. They did an interesting survey. Take a look because it comes up often in our meetings about disaster preparedness and disaster response plans.
Thank you. Do we have, that's the last item here, other than adjournment, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.